Hola, soy Alejandro. Welcome to KeySpanish. In today's lesson, you are going to learn everything you need to know to use reflexive verbs in Spanish. I'm going to start off talking about what are reflexive verbs and then discuss their form and usage of the reflexive constructions. We'll then cover the position of the reflexive pronouns and we will end talking about reciprocal constructions. So, what are reflexive verbs or reflexive constructions? These are the ones where the person or thing performing the action, that is the subject, is also the receiver of such action. In grammar terms, in grammar jargon, that would be the subject and the object of the verb are the same. So the person that does the action is also the one who receives it. And this can take three forms. Either the person performs an action on themselves, on a part of their bodies, or on something they are carrying or have. Let's take a look at the first example. Performing an action on themselves, I would say me ducho, me ducho. That is, I shower myself, as opposed to ducho a mi perro, I shower my dog. Another example would be me visto, I get dressed, I get dressed myself, instead of visto a mi hija, I dress my daughter. Let's look at another one, which will be se maquilla. She puts makeup on. As opposed to maquilla a la actriz. She puts makeup on the actress. In the second one, the person is performing an action on part of their bodies. For example, se afeita el bigote. He shaves his mustache. O se depila las piernas. She shaves her legs. And in the third option would be on something the person is carrying or has. Like se lava la ropa. He washes his clothes. He washes his clothes. Or se pone los zapatos. She puts on her shoes. Therefore, we use reflexive constructions when the subject is performing an action on themselves, on part of the body, or on something they are carrying or something they have. And to understand this reflexive construction a bit better from a maybe more logical standpoint, let's look at two good examples. I'm sure you are familiar with this sentence, me llamo Alejandro or se llama John. Many students, if they try to literally translate this, they think we are saying my name is Alejandro, my name is John. But what we are doing here is using the verb llamarse. So we are doing calling myself. We're referring to ourselves by our name. I call myself Alejandro, or he calls himself John. That's what literally means me llamo or se llama. This is a reflexive construction. And for example, if you want to say, I wonder what kind of restaurant she likes. John is thinking about Inés. And this would be me pregunto. So to wonder something is literally to ask oneself. So both of these verbs, me llamo or me pregunto, illustrate very well this concept of someone doing something on themselves, calling themselves something or asking themselves something. Now that you know what reflexive verbs are and when do we use them, let's take a closer look at the form of these verbs. Let's take the verb ducharse as an example. Yo me ducho, tú te duchas, the second person. Él, ella, usted se ducha, third person. Nosotros nos duchamos. Vosotros os ducháis. Ellos, ellas o ustedes se duchan. And you could see here that the verb ending and the pronoun refer to the same person. Me ducho, te duchas. If you are familiar with other object pronouns like direct or indirect object pronouns, you will see that this is almost identical except for the third person, in which instead of le or lo or la is se. Okay? And pay attention, se is the same for the third person singular, él, ella, usted, and the third person plural, ellos, ellas, ustedes, is both se. Okay, time to practice. Can you tell me what are the missing conjugations of the verb levantarse instead of ducharse? First one would be yo me levanto, tú te, pause the video, you need time to think, would be tú te levantas, okay? What about the other ones? Again, try to do it, pause the video and complete the table. Let's see if you remember. Third person would be se levanta. Él, ella, usted se levanta. En nosotros nos levantamos. Vosotros os levantáis. Ellas, ustedes se levantan. Levantarse is to wake up. Now that you know the forms and these reflexive pronouns, me, te, se, nos, os, les, let's briefly look at what's the position of these pronouns in a sentence. And it is the same than with any other object pronoun. Okay, this is the same principle that with direct or indirect objects. With conjugated verbs, either in the past, in the present, in the future, we place this before the verb. So, Sergio se acuesta muy tarde. Sergio wakes up very late. With negative constructions, we need to be careful. You place it after the no. So John no se acuesta tarde. John does not go to bed late. No se acuesta tarde. Yo no me acuesto tarde. So you place the reflexive pronoun between the no and the verb. And there are only 3 scenarios in which the pronoun goes after the verb and attached to it. So acostarse would be the infinitive form. Acostarse tarde es común en España. Going to bed late is common in Spain. Acostarse tarde es común en España. Acostándose tan tarde, mi hermano siempre está cansado. This is the gerund form. Acostándose tan tarde, mi hermano siempre está cansado. Waking up so late, my brother is always tired. And the last one will be the affirmative command. Right? The imperative form in the affirmative way would be after the verb to. Juanito, acuéstate que ya son las 11. Juanito, go to bed. It's already 11 p.m. ¿Vale? Acuéstate. So remember, most of the times when you conjugate a verb, the reflexive pronoun will be before the verb. Sergio se acuesta temprano o tarde. If you put a no, put it before the reflexive pronoun. No se acuesta. And then when you use an infinitive, acostarse, a gerund, acostándose, or the affirmative command, acuéstate, then you use the pronoun, the reflexive pronoun, or any other pronoun after the verb and attach to it. Acostarse, acostándose, acuéstate. And now let's practice a bit more. Let's try to complete the dialogue. John says, suelo levantarme a las 6. I normally wake up at 6. And Sergio replies, vaya, muy temprano. Yo me levanto más tarde, sobre las 8. What verb do we need here and how do you conjugate it? It would be te levantas. Vaya, te levantas muy temprano. Wow, you wake up very early. I wake up later, normally at around 8. Te levantas muy temprano. Let's do another one. Again, pause the video if you need more time to think. John says, ¿te lavas los dientes antes o después de desayunar? Do you brush your teeth before or after having breakfast? Sergio replies, mi mujer, antes de desayunar, pero yo me los lavo después. What would be the correct verb and form? We would say, mi mujer se lava los dientes antes de desayunar, pero yo me los lavo después. My wife brushes her teeth before having breakfast, but I do it after. One more. Yo normalmente después de ducharme me visto en 5 minutos y voy al trabajo. Normalmente después de ducharme me visto en 5 minutos y voy al trabajo. Normally, after having a shower, after taking a shower, I get dressed in 5 minutes and go to work. Sergio replies, yo también, rápido, pero mi mujer necesita casi 20 minutos para vestirse. Nunca sabe qué ropa elegir. What's a missing verb here? Would be, yo también me visto rápido. I always get dressed fast. I also, get dressed fast. But my wife needs almost 20 minutes to get dressed. She never knows what clothes to choose. And one more would be John saying, algo curioso, mis padres a las 8. Sergio replies, vaya, es que los ingleses os acostáis muy pronto. Los españoles casi nunca antes de las 11. What are the missing verbs and forms? Well, the verb is acostarse, obviously. What's the correct form here? Would be mis padres se acuestan. My parents go to bed at 8. And, well, Sergio is surprised. Sergio, Spanish people, we almost never go to bed before 11. Casi nunca nos acostamos antes de las 11. You now know what reflexive verbs are, when do we use them, and the form of the reflexive pronouns. Let's look at two special cases. The first one is to emphasize things. Sometimes when we want to express this reflexivity, it's not enough to use the reflexive pronoun. We want to make it even more clear. And for that, we use either solo or mismo. For example, the kid can say, me visto yo solo. I dress myself. Not my parents, no, I'm very mature already, so I get dressed myself, me visto yo solo. And the woman could say, or we can refer to the woman saying, sorry, it's a mistake here, no maquillo, could be se maquilla ella misma. Se maquilla ella misma. He does her own makeup. Let's look at two more examples. You can either say, hoy me he cortado el pelo, which, by the way, doesn't mean I cut the hair myself. That's why you need here the emphasis, or to make it more clear, to avoid the ambiguity. When we say in Spanish, me corto el pelo, we normally mean we went to the hairdresser. To emphasize that we do it ourselves, you would say, me corto el pelo yo mismo. I cut my own hair. Me corto el pelo yo mismo. And for this emphasis, there are two ways of doing it. You can do it with the preposition or without. We said before, se maquilla ella misma, but you can also say, se maquilla a sí misma. No maquillo, again, it's a mistake in the spelling here, would be se maquilla a sí misma. Or instead of saying me corto el pelo yo mismo, I can say me corto el pelo a mí mismo. So again, two ways for this emphasis. You could say yo mismo, tú mismo, él mismo, nosotros mismos, ellos mismos, or you can use a preposition before a, and therefore this changes the construction for the first and the second person. You would say a mí mismo or a ti mismo, and then the others maintain the same form. You just add the preposition before, a él mismo, a nosotros mismos. Most of the time it will be enough to use the reflexive pronoun and say yo me visto, but in special scenarios, as you can see, we would say me visto yo solo, me visto a mí mismo, me visto yo mismo. And finally, let's look at the reciprocal constructions. And here is when two or more subjects perform an action onto each other. We have here a dad that is very proud because mis hijas se quieren mucho. My daughters love each other very much. But we can also have not a so happy dad saying, mis hijos siempre se pelean. My children always fight each other. In English, you don't always need to say each other. Sometimes it's implied or understood by the context. You could only say, or say just, my children always fight, and it will be understood that it's each other. Or you may need to specify it. But in Spanish, you would use the reflexive, or the reciprocal construction. Mis hijos siempre se pelean. They are fighting each other. And let's look at one more example of this reciprocal construction. Victoria y su abuelo se escriben cartas con frecuencia. Victoria and her grandfather write letters to each other frequently. So they don't write letters, they write them to each other. And that's why we say se escriben cartas and not just escriben cartas. This se means that is reciprocal. That's it for this lesson. I hope you found it useful. And now I want to give you the opportunity of win some free tapas. To get your tapa gratis, you need to let me know in the comments the answer to these 4 questions. Okay, you have 4 sentences and the verbs in English. Sergio gets dressed muy rápido porque wakes up muy tarde. John y su familia go to bed muy temprano. And yo shower con agua fría. And mi mujer y yo brush our teeth juntos. How would you say all of this? You need to know the vocabulary for habitual actions and the proper conjugation of the reflexive verb. So let me know in the comments. And if you are taking your first steps with Spanish and want to make the most of your study time, you will love my Spanish Beginner Kit. With this completely free set of resources, you have everything you need to boost your Spanish, organized in 4 steps. And as you can see in the first one, laying the groundwork, you have a link to the book, New Reference Grammar of Modern Spanish. If you want to dive deeper into reflexive pronouns, this book is fantastic and very detailed. And you can also download high-quality flashcards with the most common vocabulary that I created for you, and 2,000 most frequent words, a list of cognates, my recommendations for books to read, videos to watch, and websites to practice your Spanish, and many, many more things. You will find the link in the description, and thank you so much for your attention on this lesson on reflexive pronouns. And if you want to continue learning Spanish, you can watch the lesson I did on another of the most challenging topics of Spanish grammar, which is the use of por and para. Muchas gracias, soy Alejandro y nos vemos en clase.